I like to tell people that like our job at Aclymate is to like get businesses to care about climate change. There's always a good reason not to do this, but the reality is like the planet can't afford to wait. And so we're trying to educate our customers up front that like this is something that it will benefit your business today, and the planet needs you to get on board with this today, not next year. Bigger companies don't operate that same way. So as we've moved into being able to serve larger customers, they really don't feel like they need to do this unless someone is kind of forcing them to do it. And then they turn to us and say, I don't really care about climate change, but my biggest customer is telling me I have to do this, so please help. We envision a system where if we have all of this data about all of these companies and their carbon footprints, then we basically like control the data layer and really do like full cradle to gate accounting. Once we unlock that level of sort of data and connectivity, a lot of different things become possible.
Hi, William. Thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself? And for those people that have never heard of Aclymate, can you tell us a little bit about what the company does?
Yeah, so my name is William Loopesko. I am the founder and chief technology officer of a company called Aclymate. I'm based in Denver, Colorado. That's where I grew up. My background was in earth sciences and sort of civil engineering before I took a hard pivot into startups 9 years ago. Taught myself how to code, taught myself how to start up, and this is actually my second company. Aclymate is a software company that makes a SaaS product for small and medium businesses who want to take action to address their climate footprint. So we help them measure, reduce, and offset their carbon footprint so that they can show their customers, investors, and other stakeholders that they are doing the right thing for the planet.
So you mentioned there that you've actually started 2 businesses at this point. What was the moment you realized that Aclymate would actually become a real company, not just a cool idea?
I don't think I would start a company that I didn't believe in. So I think I believed in the idea from the start, but it wasn't my idea. It was my co-founder's idea. I was just brought in to build it. So he and I met May 18th, 2020. We had met previously when I was doing my first company. We had met through networking. And from there, we had stayed in touch. When my first company fell apart during COVID, I posted on LinkedIn that I was looking for my new thing. And he was like, hey, I have this great idea for a company. You know how to build software, like, let's talk. And we met and I believed in it right away and jumped on board. And here we are 5 years later.
So you've said the goal is to become like the QuickBooks of carbon accounting for SMBs.
That's correct.
What would that actually look like in practice?
In practice, I mean, that's pretty close to what it would look like, right? So it would be the software that small, medium businesses use when they need to do their carbon accounting, but don't feel like they are experts in carbon accounting, because carbon accounting is like a very niche, weird thing that most people don't know about. But like, we envision a future where businesses are going to have to do this. That's already happening in Europe. America is obviously a little bit behind the curve, especially now. But long term, we see carbon accounting as critical to business as regular accounting. And we want Aclymate to be the solution that they turn to do that.
Going back to the beginning then, obviously new product, the space is starting to become more known, but I wouldn't necessarily say, as you said, it's not everywhere that does it. Back when it first started 5 years ago, how was it you got those first few clients when it was even less known than it is right now?
My co-founder has actually been operating in this space for a long time. So he started another company in the carbon offset space before Aclymate. He started a company that was like basically doing carbon reforestation, so developing carbon offsets. And so he already had a bunch of contacts in the space. And so our earliest customers were primarily through his network. And then we, from there, were able to find a first really good vein for us, which was B Corps, and then sort of like try to just, push into that vein as much as possible early on. So that's how we got our first few customers.
And then is it still through networking that you build up now, or is there some other channel that you found works better?
No, now we've started developing some channel partnerships. So for example, we are the preferred carbon accounting solution for PPAI, which is Promotional Products Association International, the promotional products industry group. And then we have a couple other distribution partnerships in place. We also do some digital marketing, ads, SEO, content, all of that stuff. And we also have gotten a lot of, networking, speaking at conferences, doing webinars, like that sort of thing. That's been a great way for us to get customers too.
Why is it that you think the partnerships has outperformed outperformed everything else then?
Because they're scalable, right? So like if we can sell one partner on us as their preferred solution and they can turn around and sell it to 1,000 companies, those one-to-many sales are really much more scalable than having to like pick off companies one by one.
It's a fair point. So I've spoken to a fair number of companies now, and a good amount of them do grow through partnerships. I think one of the weaknesses that they do talk about is that partnerships can be quite lumpy, the same as like referrals or word of mouth and that kind of thing, which makes it really hard to forecast. Have you found that that's the case?
Oh yeah, oh definitely. So we have one great one that we love, and we would like some others, but they're hard. Like it's really hard. So when we're developing our forecasts, my co-founder is in charge of going out and getting these partnerships, and like, I think I can do this, but I actually have no idea. So that's why things like digital marketing and sales are, much more predictable, and it's easier to build like repeatable funnels. But also those funnels are just, again, much harder because you have to put in so much work to get one customer.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I see where you're coming from. The thing is, when you build the digital marketing channels and they're working well, you almost have people coming in on autopilot, same as the partnerships channel. But obviously, it requires a lot more upfront work. You need to hire the team, you need to get them in place, all that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, our biggest challenge is that it's a very crowded space online, and we are competing with some very well-funded companies that have much more money than we do, and so they can flat out just beat us on SEO and ads and all of that just because they have more budget for that. So that's been our struggle, and so it's still something we're working on. It's still something we envision long-term being a great channel for us, but it's been hard.
I'm digging in a little bit because you have, I would say, quite large marketing team for a startup at your stage. So often with a company at your stage, I'll see like one or two digital marketing people, but you have quite a large marketing team.
We have 2 full-time plus interns. We have our marketing director, our marketing assistant, and then we have a rotating cast of interns, usually like 3 per semester, who they're the ones who actually do the work of like writing the blog posts and like producing podcast episodes and whatever it is that we're doing at that time. Like just content machines, basically. And then our 2 like full-time marketing staff are doing more higher level strategy, all that stuff, SEO a lot. And then actually our marketing assistant, she actually spends a fair amount of her time working with me on the product side on design and making sure that the product looks good and that all of our visual assets are branded and appealing, etc. So it's not just marketing for her.
I'm curious why, if you feel like partnerships are so good and they work so well for you, why is it you're investing all this time into the digital marketing? Is it more for like the sort of brand awareness side of things, or is it that you want to move over into marketing instead of just focusing on the partnerships?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. We do think brand awareness is important. My co-founder, Mike, is a nationally recognized expert in climate change, carbon offsets, all that. And so he has a perspective to share, and we want to make sure that that's, we feel like that's a pretty important part of who we are as a company, and we want to make sure that's out there. So that's one. But then, yeah, I mean, long term, you're right that like having a optimized, repeatable digital marketing funnel is a long term, really good way to grow this company. And so we're investing in that as a future channel, and we're putting the groundwork up front to be able to do that. Because we know SEO is like a multi-year effort, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially with AI chatbots now as well.
Right.
It's hard to know how you write for one versus the other. It's funny, like my background is in SEO, and there are so many people that have just had their worlds turned upside down over the past year and a half. It's quite a sight to see. So something I really like about your company is you have your customer success team feed directly into product and marketing, and not enough companies do that. I think that's a really good idea. What has been uncovered by them that's surprised you recently?
Man, so many things. So like I'm the chief technology officer. So my job is building our product and making sure it works. And I spend a lot of time thinking of how to build it so that it works. And then we'll release something. Like we just released something today. We just released a big feature yesterday. And inevitably, I'm sure I'm going to hear from customers that right away, they're like, well, have you thought about if it works in this way and this way and this way? Our software is really designed to be able to work with any business. That's our aspiration. And so every business has like different data, different needs, different operational structures. The way Aclymate works is we take in that data and we crunch it to figure out what the carbon footprint is, and then we display it. But that means we got to be able to take in data from everywhere and from all of our different customers. That is just an ever evolving puzzle of like, what is our customers' data? Oh, well, this data looks like this. But now all of a sudden we've got this new customer and that the same data looks completely different. And we didn't think about how to like handle data in that format or that comes from that source. So we got to change a bunch of things. So that is a constant challenge that we're dealing with. And that's why we have our customer guy basically driving our product development efforts of like, this is what I'm hearing from customers. And these are the kinds of data sources that they need us to be able to process, or these are the kinds of ways in which they need us to be able to generate our reports. And then he just says that directly to me.
It's funny, no matter how many QA tests you go through, your customers will always be the best QA people out there. You can never get it right for all of them.
No, we will never get it right for all of them. We've gotten better at QA internally ourselves, and then we'll inevitably launch something, and then the next day we'll have a customer be like, hey, like it doesn't work for me with this data set. And then like, all right, well, we gotta go figure out that.
Okay, real quick, if you're a sustainability founder and growth feels stuck, this part is for you. You're doing between 700K to 3 million in revenue. You've built something amazing, but growing it is just exhausting. Every lead comes from a referral, every deal depends on you, and every time you try to scale, something breaks. Your pipeline, your sanity, or even worse, your impact. The problem is you are too close to see the real issues. You're trying to read the label from inside the bottle. That is exactly what we help you with at Plucky Bamboo. We work with planet-first B2B companies to find and fix the hidden bottlenecks that quietly block their growth, whether that's unclear positioning, weak lead flow, or a sales process that just doesn't convert. First, we uncover what's broken. Then, if it makes sense, we build the systems to fix it, so you can scale your impact without burning out. We've done this for companies like Blue Banyan and Scrap, and after hundreds of conversations with sustainability founders and CEOs, I know where the cracks show up when you start to grow. So if you're ready to find and fix what's holding back your growth and impact, visit pluckybamboo.com to see how we can help. Okay, back to the episode. You mentioned just now that not so many companies are doing carbon accounting yet, and even less actually understand it and what it is. Mm-hmm. So obviously that education is a big challenge. How is it you're approaching the market to educate them more and I guess move them down that awareness funnel a bit?
Yeah, I mean, that's part of why we've invested so heavily relative to our size in like content and digital marketing and all of that, is to be able to create the content, blog posts, podcasts, videos, webinars, all the things. We've tried a lot of them at this point. Conference talks about what it is that we're doing and why businesses should care. I like to tell people that like our job at Aclymate is to like get businesses to care about climate change, because we spend a lot of time talking to customers and are like, oh yeah, that's great. Like I think climate change is a super big problem and I totally support what you guys are doing, but like this year there's inflation. So this will be like next year's problem, right? And then there's always a good reason not to do this, but the reality is like the planet can't afford to wait. And so we're trying to educate our customers up front that like, this is something that it will benefit your business today. And the planet needs you to get on board with this today, not next year.
Yeah, it's easy. Like so many of them can get caught up in just what's happening right now. And on the one hand, as a business, yes, you do want to focus on like the next constraint, the next bottleneck. But at the same time, it's hard because you've got to educate these people that it's not just that this is going to be a future problem, but it's going to also probably be a very short-term problem very quickly. And there's lots of risk involved and all that kind of thing. Is there usually a typical aha moment when prospects finally get it and take action?
Early on, we had some success with smaller companies, like single proprietor, small LLCs, where just the founder was super passionate about this and would just force everyone to do it. Bigger companies don't operate that same way. So as we've moved into being able to serve larger customers, they really don't feel like they need to do this unless someone is kind of forcing them to do it. That's usually the aha moment, is when they realize like, I need to do this to like be able to gain this big customer or to not lose this big customer. And then they turn to us and say like, I don't know anything about this. I don't really care about climate change, but my biggest customer is telling me I have to do this, so please help.
Yeah, I guess it's hard because the point of a big business is to be risk averse. At the point where you become bigger, it becomes less about taking entrepreneurial risks and more about like protecting what you have. And I guess if other companies are doing it, you can't really control the speed of that?
Climate is a risk to every business. I don't need to tell you that. But I don't think businesses see it as imminent of a risk as other things like inflation or economic downturns or the political situation or all the other things that are going on right now can feel more pressing. And so while a lot of businesses will acknowledge that climate change is a risk that they might be worried about, it feels much less tangible and much further away. So they don't feel like they have to deal with it now. So one of the things we're going to be building into our software in the next few months is actually like climate risk assessments to be able to help quantify for our customers like what their climate risk is, both in terms of like their facilities and maybe their real estate assets, but also in terms of their supply chain.
I like that. That's nice. It would also be a good sales asset as well. Almost similar to an ROI calculator. Talk about a little bit in general terms about what it is they do. And then you can say to them, okay, here's the risks to you coming up in the next 2, 5, 10 years. I see that working. So obviously it sounds like you're trying a lot of different things with messaging right now, with all the marketing work that you're doing, trying lots of things. What do you feel has really moved the needle most for you? Has it been like the webinars? Has it been lead magnets or content?
What I can say is that the core message that we try different flavors of, but it always comes back to the core idea of carbon accounting is complicated and we help make it simple. So we are the experts, so you don't have to be. Like, we want you to focus on your business and we're going to take care of all that for you. We're going to demystify it. We're going to make software that's simple, intuitive for you to be able to figure that out. You just pay us to be the experts in carbon. You just focus on growing your business and not having to worry.
As you've kind of grown over the past few years then, has there been anything that I guess broke, like the product or onboarding? There was a part of the team where you just didn't have enough people and you struggled to get it fixed?
Yes, still every day sometimes. It feels like it. No, the best example that comes to mind is my co-founder loves saying solutions create new problems. And so it seems like every time we solve a problem for our customers, then we end up with 10 new problems that now we need to go solve. The best example of that is about a year ago, we rolled out a brand new feature that was supply chain accounting. And it was something our customers had been asking for a long time. So being able to input data about all of your suppliers and doing like line by line transaction level accounting. So if you bought 100,000 things this month, we can look at the carbon footprint of all 100,000 things you bought. And we create this like big vendor graph and assign like different emission factors to each of those vendors. And then those vendors then are shared across different companies. And so anyways, it works well, but it came with this gigantic data entry headache of now like having to put in hundreds of thousands of rows of data possibly, and then having to categorize. We did it so that like instead of categorizing row by row, you categorize vendors. And then like we know that like everything from this vendor is in this category of emissions, and therefore we can calculate for that. But still, if you have 2,000 vendors, you have to categorize each vendor one at a time. That's how it worked. That's how it worked a year ago. So we came out with this great new feature, being able to categorize vendors to be able to process hundreds of thousands of rows of transactions, but it was super laborious to have to go through and do all this vendor categorization. So our customers loved that we had expanded the capacity, but like hated the added burden that we had put on them. So this is why we let our customers sort of drive our development decisions, because what we ended up doing was coming up with like an AI sorting to be able to have AI assign categories to each of those vendors and like making the software be able to learn. The more vendors it categorizes, the easier it gets, the fewer vendors there are to categorize, because now we can just be like, oh, company X already categorized this vendor, so we already recognize that for you, it's going to be the same thing, and we know the carbon footprint from that vendor. But like that was an example of like we built this really cool thing, and then it just created this awful experience for our customers that we had to get through.
Is there any kind of challenge or frustration that just keeps coming up and that doesn't seem to go away?
Yeah, customer data entry. Never ending problem. We keep coming up with like creative solutions to be able to tackle increasingly complex customer data entry needs, and they keep throwing more and more complex data sheets, formats, types, etc. at us. Building a system that is flexible enough to handle like any kind of data, but powerful enough to actually be able to like understand what it all means is probably the biggest challenge that we face right now at Aclymate.
Do you feel that customers are doing that because they're learning more about carbon accounting, so they're doing more? Or is it more the systems they're using now are just not interoperable enough?
I think it's both. So as we've expanded our software and our processing capacity, like with this vendor thing that I just told you about, we are being able to process more of our customers' data and therefore asking for more of it. And then as they are sending us that data, they are sending it from systems that are not interoperable. And so they just like send us garbage that we can't really use. And then it like doesn't work well with our systems. And so then we have to figure out how to make it not garbage, how to make it so that our system can actually accept that kind of data. Yeah, that's probably the biggest problem we have at Aclymate right now on the product side.
Let's fast forward a few years. If Aclymate becomes the leader in your space, what becomes possible then?
We have some pretty big ambitions, obviously, as a startup. What we really see is what we call like the carbon network. And it's this idea that all emissions are connected to each other in some way, right? So like when you buy a plane ticket, you're buying that plane ticket and that emission's on you, but it's also on the airline. Same thing when you buy like electricity, right? So every emission flows through our economy from a supplier to a vendor to a supplier to a vendor, all the way from like cradle to gate, right? When the first molecule of carbon is burned all the way till like it ends up in the landfill. So we envision a system where if we have all of this data about all of these companies and their carbon footprints, then we basically like control the data layer of understanding carbon accounting at a very large scale. Then we can make businesses, people, individuals, whatever, track their emissions through their economy and really do like full cradle to gate accounting. Or like you as an employee of a company being able to go from one company to another and understand how your moving to that employer will affect their footprint, or vice versa, being able to now openly see like what that company's carbon footprint is and making your decision whether or not you want to work for them based on how good of a company they are from a sustainability standpoint. So there's lots of different ways of like once we unlock that level of sort of data and connectivity, a lot of different things become possible.
Obviously, this is your second company now. Are there any big lessons you've learned about leadership along the way?
Yeah, my co-founder and I always tell our employees I call it like radical empowerment. We hire people that we can trust, and then we get out of their way and let them do their jobs. And I think a lot of founders, especially in early stage companies, especially young, inexperienced first-time founders, have a tendency to want to micromanage and to make sure that like everyone is doing everything exactly in the way that they envision it because it's their vision and their company and their baby. And that can be stifling to creativity, to innovation, productivity, etc. Frankly, I am too busy to be a micromanager. Even if I wasn't, I wouldn't want to be. I trust my team implicitly to do the job that they're doing. I mean, I'm still going to communicate to them the vision for what we want, but then leave it up to them to execute and like give them the freedom to make mistakes and then to learn from their mistakes and then to grow and then keep going. I think if you have a culture of like fear of repercussions for making mistakes, then your team is never going to actually be able to take risks and do things that are bold and innovative because they're going to be too afraid to fail.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, especially when it's their first company. I think a big part of it is fear. They find it so hard to relinquish control to their first few employees because they've built this company themselves. It's their baby. And when they get those first few employees, they do tend to micromanage because they are worried that someone else doesn't care about the business as much as they do. But I think what they tend to forget is generally it doesn't matter how much someone cares about the company. It's how good they are at their job and how well they want to do at that job. And I think that's what some founders tend to forget. So I can see why you've taken on that challenge. What did you call it? Sorry, radical empowerment.
Yeah, like we just like fully empower our employees to do the best that they can and to make mistakes because just mistakes happen. All of us are human.
Final question for you, William. If you had one piece of advice for another founder in sustainability, what would it be apart from the one you just gave?
Well, first of all, I would want to congratulate anyone who's an entrepreneur in sustainability because the planet needs more people who care about the planet, especially now. And the piece of advice that I would have, which is related to that, is it can be really, really hard to feel optimistic about the state of our planet sometimes, especially in the sustainability space. We are so awash constantly in bad news about climate change and how hot it is and fires and storms, and it can be very discouraging. But the key is to take that discouragement and turn it into action, right? Of like, instead of just burying our heads in the sand and waiting for it to all inevitably happen and for the whole planet to get wiped out, we have it within our capacity to do something about this. And so I read those headlines as like, hopefully this will be a way for more people to start caring and to realize the stakes that we're all dealing with and to get involved. And I see it every day in our employees and our customers and people who are just so, message me on LinkedIn out of the blue and say like, I'm so excited about what you guys are doing. Can I work for you for free? So yeah, don't get discouraged. Keep fighting the good fight because it does matter and like we can get there together.
If people want to find out more about Acclimate, how can they do so?
Acclymate.com. That's ACLYMATE.com. That's probably the best way. We're also on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, all the places that people congregate online. But certainly our website is where there's the most information.
William, thank you so much for your time today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Absolutely. You too.